Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and video game news. Today is Friday, March 15th. Now I have a meeting I have to deal with later in the afternoon today, so today is going to be a fairly different experience, which kind of sucks because the feedback I got as far as lowering the game audio seems to have worked miracles with an average watch time of about 7 minutes and 58 seconds. That is massively higher than any other watch time I've ever seen for one of these streams. Now, in honesty, it's a 4-hour stream, so that's still balancing out a lot of people who probably stopped watching in the first 30 seconds with people who watched a significant amount of the stream, if not all of it. More than I doubt anybody actually watched it twice, which would really help is if everybody watched something twice or 3 times as far as watch times, but that's not realistic. We have no updates here on Yu-Gi-Oh! We're going to spend very little time today in Yu-Gi-Oh! And we're not going to look at very many games that we're going to make YouTube shorts from the last stream because that broke, which means next stream on Monday will probably be a very long one. We also want to touch on the spring sale, which I confused for the summer sale, and I'll show what I'm leaning towards thinking about buying, although I may not buy anything because the spring sale is just not really offering any benefit other than the games being on sale. Which, yeah. Some of my thoughts as far as if something was on sale before the spring sale sold, that it wouldn't be on sale after the spring sale seems to also have been proven wrong in a lot of cases, where I am seeing games that still are on sale. Like regardless of the fact that they started to be on sale a couple days before the sale happened. Now I am noticing with the dual streaming that there is more disconnections happening. Quick, like few second long disconnecting, reconnecting from either Twitch or YouTube. I'm not sure which actually, and yeah, that could be an issue, but it doesn't seem like it's really an issue, so I'm not going to worry too much about it. For the accountability section, very quickly, I'm still playing Hand of Fate 2. I finished the map maker challenge and now I'm trying to do the servant challenge. There is a decent chance I will just have to rage quit the servant challenge, however, because it does seem to be fairly integrated into the fighting mechanic, which I find incredibly difficult in Hand of Fate 2, and I don't think it was much better in Hand of Fate 1. I think it probably was worse in Hand of Fate 1. One would hope that they were at least slightly improving on that, but yeah. So it's a longer series than I'd like it to really be, particularly considering how I'm probably not going to be able to beat or even see all the levels. Hand of Fate might be a great example of a game that I could play off screen on a Steam Deck, which, yes, it's looking very much like I need to get a Steam Deck for even extra reasons. It's either going to be a case where I need to buy a Steam Deck and get what I want and play what I want on Steam, or I need to buy the last few Nintendo Switch games that I would want to play and play those, because there is going to be a point in the next few weeks where I am going to have just major extra time commitments and it's going to almost certainly affect stream times, and is going to have me just sitting around out away from my computer. I don't want to go into too much details, but yeah. So there's that. I need something to play while I'm sitting around and waiting. And I don't want to sit on my phone and play just phone games. Well, I did like the map maker challenge here. I really can't afford to go quiet. I'm going to start talking about video game news really fast, and this definitely will be just an experiment on seeing how far and how fast we can make this stream, because I am targeting today, instead of a bloated going on for 4-hour stream, I am targeting a 2-hour stream with doing the extra spring sale commentary. And at some level, I almost want to see if I can do this every stream, but it's probably not going to happen. Alright. Going to get rid of 2 cards. Bring this up. Activate this. Bring this up. Gonna activate his ability. Get rid of 3 cards. Bring this up. Whoops. This is the one trick to not do that, I guess. I literally caused my own failure there. That was just plain stupidity and greed on my part. I should have just gone for Zeus and a few summons. I don't know how to really report on these game jobs direct. It seems like it would be a lot of extra reporting for not really good enough reason. So I think I may just follow them on Twitter but not really mention them. In the same way that there are job listings on GameDeveloper.com, but I'm not mentioning every single job listings. I don't think that's helpful to the vast majority of people who are not qualified or don't want to be a video game programmer, which is almost certainly the largest majority of my audience, and would always be the largest majority of my audience. Alright, let's see. So Gearbox is celebrating 25 years of Gearbox, and they put out a Borderlands throwback to the first century of the critically acclaimed series. Borderlands has certainly changed a decent amount. from the first game to the second game to the third game to the spin-offs. It is also kind of the only thing Gearbox really can say is exclusively their baby, where other things they've worked on, there aren't that many other things they've worked on in the first place, and they're not going to highlight like Duke Nukem Forever being finished by them and not even really started by them. The Godot engine has a new mostly bug fix update. So version 4.1.4 and version 4.2.2, which would make me assume that the minor version here is probably an indicator of feature, so that this is probably the beta thread, and this is probably the stable thread is 4.1 at the moment, and then the point versions almost always are security updates. Yeah, 4.2.2 is a release candidate, and I lost there due to my own stupidity. I very possibly will play some Yu-Gi-Oh! Later today off screen. I mean, it could happen at least. It very possibly won't, though, because I'm just never really motivated to play Yu-Gi-Oh! And if I'm not motivated enough to sit through a 10-20 minute game, I'll just stop paying attention. THQ Nordic, which I guess is still part of Embracer Group, is doing a fairly old school thing as they're trying to promote this new Alone in the Dark, in that they have gotten several YouTubers and put them alone in a dark house, like, and then these people are retweeting it. They're retweeting these YouTubers or content creators in general. I think I saw PewDiePie also was there. But yeah, that feels like a fairly old school way to promote something, though, is to try to have YouTubers or streamers do some ridiculous gimmick like that. And it does potentially make an argument that the strength of the game is not, they're not confident in the strength of the game themselves, because it would make a lot more sense to just have streamers, gamers, play Alone in the Dark and give their reaction, or play the game in the dark and then film their reaction there. But then we've already seen what feels like several poor attempts on Alone in the Dark to promote it as something, or make it look like something it probably isn't, making it seem like it might be more of a first-person shooter, third-person shooter game than I imagine it should be. Like Alone in the Dark should, if it's going to follow the tradition of the original Alone in the Dark games, it should have guns that have very limited ammo, and you use them very sparingly, closer to something like the first Resident Evil, not much later versions of Resident Evil where you just have infinite ammo. Resident Evil 4, 5, and 6 are great examples of where they get very, very far away from it being an actual limited ammo horror game. Which, weirdly, that is almost an argument for what do you define as fun, because I would say 4, 5, and 6 probably are quote-unquote more fun because you have less limitations on ammo and you can just mow down zombies left and right. Whereas if you want to have a horror experience in any genre, whether it's movies, books, video games, whatever, you are trying to evoke at least a little bit of that sense of dis-ease and unease, I guess, and make people uncomfortable. And if you're uncomfortable, you're probably not having quote-unquote fun as much. I mean, you're probably going to have fun in small bursts of being uncomfortable. You're definitely not going to just outright love every second of it or feel entertained in the same ways. So yeah, there's definitely a question there as far as how do you sell a horror game. You probably have to sell it on the scares and the discomfort. We've also seen that in some of the advertisements that Konami has done with one of these Silent Hill games, is that they've made the game look in a combat trailer like there's way more combat than there should be in that Silent Hill game. And so there is definitely a narrative and pushback happening, or a discussion happening at least, around people wanting true horror experiences and not wanting Resident Evil 4 action experiences. Unfortunately, the numbers just, I don't think, are there to really justify to a company that they should make a true horror experience versus a action game. Same is true for action movies, is that there's much more motivation to make a Marvel action movie than there is to make a Saw horror movie. They make Saw horror movies because they know that it can dominate in the October month each year when nobody is going to put out a action movie because it won't get enough views and enough people won't be free to watch the movie. The same thing I don't think can be said for video games, where I think an action video game could easily be released in October and it would sell just as well. There's a difference between buying a video game and staying inside and watching a movie and going outside or going to a theater. GameDeveloper.com has a headline here. Here's what happened when Rovio integrated AI into its customer service pipeline. I imagine a lot of people have tried this, and I imagine it has not worked terribly badly, considering how the in-poopification of all services and all customer service just continues to happen too. We've been seeing, way before they even started using AI as a catchphrase, we've been seeing chatbots in customer service for a very long time. And for the most part, a lot of people, I think, are well suited to go on a website and use a chatbot to answer very generic issues, which is going to be the vast majority of customer service issues. Excuse me while I pour water from one glass to another. A lot of these games in Yu-Gi-Oh!, once you just get stuck, it increasingly is obvious you should just surrender and just save your time. There's just no way. There's not enough of a reward to see the game all the way through. And that's probably why I see a slightly higher percentage than what I think I should be seeing of players cheat and disconnect their connections and just try and end the games without being penalized. But yeah, the vast majority of customer service things, if you're ordering something, is like this was delivered wrong, this was delivered broken, I didn't order this, things like that can be handled by procedurally generated chatbots that they probably are going to label as AI more and more, even though there's really not going to be any real artificial intelligence. The actual artificial intelligence on customer service is probably pretty useless, because you don't want even human intelligence in customer service. Businesses don't. Anybody who's ever worked a customer service job of any sorts knows that they're under strict scripts and strict guidelines and strict procedures. Anybody who works in customer service for a decent amount of time almost certainly would make it would make their job easier if they could just actually help people instead of making people jump through hoops. I had a TV break and the customer service, even up to the managers, are following scripts just to piss people off, just to not help people. And then a lot of times even if customer service can do the right things, and the rest of the company, the shipping, the receiving people, can drop the ball. So it might not even be the customer service's fault. It's almost never the customer service people's fault. It might be the managers of the customer service's fault, but the people you're actually talking to have no power. There definitely is room for more laws and protections of the consumer. And it's a real shame that you get slightly more protection if you buy something on a credit card and you have to get into the whole banking credit system just to have some level of purchase protection or warranty on a lot of products, so you can dispute the charges. And in many cases, disputing the charges is just too dangerous of a thing or too much of a hassle to do. If you dispute the charges on, say, Xbox or PlayStation or Steam, more than likely your entire account, including hundreds if not thousands of games you've bought previously, may get locked out, and then you can't play any of them. And that seems like there's room for consumer protection on that aspect too. But yeah, we are under a time crunch today, so I'm not going to actually read this story. But I will say GameDeveloper.com has it. Let's see. Diablo 4 has a ray tracing update that is coming out March 26th. The dark areas of Diablo 4 could really probably do well with ray tracing to just lighten up the dungeons and tunnels you'd be crawling through. Unfortunately, in my shopping during the spring sale, I looked at Diablo 4 and the reviews are pretty mixed, maybe even approaching negative, I don't remember. Suffice it to say, the way they've made Diablo 4 this seasonal experience that resets, instead of having it just be a single player experience that that you would expect from, well, fans of Diablo 1 and 2 would expect, makes it really undesirable to actually try and play. And people who are playing it aren't liking it for probably more reasons than just that one. So a little visual ray tracing update isn't going to change things. Which I think that reminds me well enough to just mention it here. The vast majority of what I did shopping for the spring sale, and this is probably something that I've suggested I should do this at every sale, is I should either go through the fall list and do some major fall list cleanup, or I should go through the wish list and do some wish list cleanup. So in this sale, I did wish list cleanup. I went through the entire wish list, just trying to look at games based on their ratings, which Steam did not really sort the wish list based on ratings, so I ended up just going through all of the games on my wish list, looking at them, looking at certain games that were just rated poorly, considering whether I should really keep games if they are just the bad version of a sequel to a good game. For instance, like Trying 3 is one I probably still will want to play because it's only one bad game out of 4 games, but even that seems kind of crazy to do. There are some Final Fantasy games where the idea falls apart way more, where if you were just trying to own every single Final Fantasy game, knowing that I probably will never have time to play and cover all the Final Fantasy games, that seems like that's a waste of time to buy something like 13.2, which is not well reviewed at all. There's a lot of games that were free that I've just gone through and added to my library. There's just no reason to not have them added to the library if the games are free to start with. I am not particularly super concerned at the moment about disclosing whether I got a free game for free because it was free on Steam. Because I'm not really keeping any track of how much I'm paying for any of the games, so for all I know they all are free games. So yeah, it was a lot of cleanup happening on top of shopping. And on the aspect of shopping, I have so many games and so little time at this point that there's only a few extra reasons, special reasons to buy games. If I think they are going to potentially maybe be delisted or pulled from sale, if they have some major historic relevancy, if maybe they won't be compatible in the relative future, or if they're games that I specifically want to play and follow up on what games I'm already covering and playing, which that is probably what I should exclusively be buying, is just games that I specifically want to play and want to speed up the process. There should be a shift towards playing newer games. Most of the games I'm playing are pretty old, and we'll get into that more as we go. Let's see, we can only summon 3 cards this turn. Which means we should just be able to win. Yeah, I think since we're going for a shorter thing, I think that's just going to be it for today. This will be an interesting experiment, certainly. I know a lot of people come here for Yu-Gi-Oh! And I know I need to really relabel this whole series about video game news and just call this a pre-show and not even have it in the title, because that's just not the direction I'm going to take this. It's not going to be more Yu-Gi-Oh! Or even, at best, it will be the same amount of Yu-Gi-Oh! But if there's any time crunch, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is the first thing that's going out the window. I could try and destroy 2 more cards for the daily quest. I certainly could continue to play the Duelist Cup. I have now very consistently also taken bathroom breaks in all of these streams, and I think that's probably going to stay around. I don't have a way of really avoiding that. We have a decent amount of progress still that would need to happen, and this ends in, let's see, would that be 9 days? 9 days to try and get up to 20, if we can get that far. but then we also need to get to at least platinum, and ideally I'd like to get to diamond, but they never give me enough time, or I never play enough to accomplish that. So Gameloft has announced a Dungeons & Dragons survival life simulation and action RPG hybrid for consoles and PC, which sounds like a lot of different genres to integrate. And one of the things about this this Dungeons & Dragons games is it really is set in the, I think it's called the Forgotten Realms section. Yeah, Forgotten Realms, which is also where Baldur's Gate 3 was set in, and I know that there's at least an audience out there that are not super fans with the Forgotten Realms, and just generally speaking, it would make a lot of sense to make a Dungeons & Dragons section game that's set in a different area than the Forgotten Realms. Gameloft most recently was working on Disney Dreamlight. That's what they most recently. And then they made Lego Star Wars Castaways, which sounds like a mobile game, and several Dungeon Hunter series games, which I've never heard of. I would definitely want to see more information before I'd start to get hyped around this. But it also definitely seems like this might just be a case of Hasbro rushing to license out more Dungeons & Dragons as fast as possible to get game companies to rush out as many Dungeons & Dragons games as fast as possible. And they probably will very quickly flood the market, and it'll be a case much like the Warhammer 40k games, in that there's a massive amount of them, but almost none of them are good. Video Games Chronicle says Palworld's first raid and a new PAL are coming soon. The fandom we know we've been tracking for Palworld has been dropping extremely fast. It'll be interesting once we see new content added to that early access game, if people are willing to go back to it. I wouldn't be surprised if the amount of people that go back to it are a small fraction of people who were initially interested in it. And it's definitely going to take time to make a Pokemon clone that is much more like a Pokemon game and polished enough that people actually want to play it on PC. But I do suspect we will see within the next 2 or 3 years an actual RPG game that is a Pokemon clone through and through. And the fact that Nintendo has not done anything to sue Palworld's creators and has instead focused on suing emulator makers, may speak to where their focus is, certainly. There's this horror adventure game called Stasis Bone Totem that's coming to PS4 and 5, Xbox One and Series Switch on March 28th. It's currently available on PC. And see, I wanted to check this to see if this is a sequel to another game called Stasis that, I mean, there should have been a couple of them. Yeah, there's this game, Stasis, here, and KN, or Kanye. Let's see. This was an interesting game in that it was something I covered, and then the first game is just like free. Maybe there's some deluxe content there. And it's kind of a point and click adventure, but it had this intriguing trailer here where this lady is either dreaming, which I think in the third game in the series you have to assume it's not a dream, and then she's in this experience alien abducted, and she has this like impregnated belly that she doesn't know about, and so there's this weird armor on her with a big pregnant belly as she's walking around. The thing about this trailer when it first was shown, though, is that there was just no gameplay in it at all, so you were only seeing the very nicely polished intro video, and then you play the game, and it is this odd horror point and click experience. And like honestly, I would say it's not even that scary. And that's a great example of a series that I just never really got back to. So what is the deluxe content here? Soundtrack, artwork, and screenplay. And so then in 2019, fairly quickly after the release of Kanye, or Kane, whatever it's called, they released Stasis as a point and click for real money. And so I think this would be a good one just to add. What's in the deluxe edition? This might be another one to add to just continue on my series of games that I've covered. This is a problem in particular, is you just don't know what is in the deluxe edition of a game. So you'd have to, I mean, you can't even click on it in this one, so there's just no idea at all what you're getting for that extra $3.39. Let's see if the deluxe edition is explained here. You'd think you would want to explain that. Let's see. Yeah, you'd think that the reviews would maybe have to the fact you might have to come to the reviews. Janky old school point and click janky. And see, that's kind of crazy that you would have to go to figure out. You're either just going to throw money down the toilet for art books and soundtracks you don't care about, or you're just going to buy the deluxe edition, or not buy the deluxe edition. Yeah, one of the things as far as this sale to consider, I think everybody should consider, is the fact that starting January 1st, the Steam client only supported Windows 10 or later, so anything that has a minimal support for XP, and I guess this is excluding probably also Linux. There was a Kickstarter around this game. You know, alien abduction isn't covered in a lot of story tales, and alien impregnation certainly isn't covered in a lot of stories. Let's see what the deluxe edition upgrade says it is. That's, I guess, the only way you figure it out. Digital download of Stasis, art book, soundtrack for 4K wallpapers, none of which I really care about. So, let's see. Add that to the universal cart, I guess. And that's all just to get back to the sequel. Bone Totem, also overwhelmingly positive at this point. So I can go ahead and move that to the wish list. But I should play Stasis first, just to make sure. And yeah, it's not really worth it at that discount to buy Bone Totem right now. You get a lot of these bundles too, where it's just like, here's a completely different type of game that's been bundled. I'm not sure if you're playing as the same lady even in Bone Totem. You don't see a lot of merging between point and click and horror either. I think that's probably because horror rely so heavily on jump scares, and a point and click game is not going to have a lot of that. But yeah, certainly the fact that you could even make a trilogy around a horror point and click series is surprising. And it definitely shows that point and click adventure fans are probably a little desperate for content in any games at all. Here we have a Video Games Chronicle article that says the Epic boss Tim Sweeney calls Valve execs a-holes over Steam platform fees. Emails from Epic CEO published as part of a lawsuit Valve's currently fighting. I would almost never doubt if somebody called somebody else an a-hole that other person isn't an a-hole, particularly in business. You kind of don't get to be the biggest video game marketplace without having some a-holes in management. That being said, I think Tim Sweeney should probably look in the mirror, because he has a problem with shooting his mouth off, even if it is in private amongst emails, when even in those communications, particularly in those communications where it's getting documented and written down, you should write everything as politically or polite as possible. Otherwise, it is going to be used against you. Meanwhile, I don't think anybody really cares as much about platform fees as Tim Sweeney seems to think they do. Otherwise, a lot more game companies would have gone to the Epic Games Store just to avoid the platinum platform fees. Publishers would love to see platform fees go away, but if Steam was to get rid of the current way it makes money to advertise games and have that Steam front page and have a storefront, they would just make up that money and probably more in a different way. So there would just be huge submission fees per game instead of taking a percentage per sale. And that would mean more money off the top before you've even made your first sale. And that's actually a worse system for almost everybody involved. Whereas the platform fees on Steam, taking, I think, roughly 30% of your sales to have a digital supermarket that highlights and promotes your game. Maybe the percentages could be argued are a little high, but they're pretty industry standard. And yeah, I don't know if there's the savings certainly wouldn't be passed on to you if Steam took no fee at all. The other possibility there is if Steam got rid of platform fees, they might just engage in advertising non-video game things. Inherently, for better or worse, I would say the Steam pages are pretty poor about advertising other games on a Steam page, but if all of a sudden you had banners for like porn sites, Coca-Cola ads, food, snacks, political banners all on the side of Steam, that's not going to make anybody happy if we started to see things like that. So yeah, I can't really hate on platform fees. And yeah, Tim Sweeney is losing more of the lawsuits than he's winning, and he's losing more hearts and minds, certainly every time he opens his mouth. He didn't... There is a possibility where Epic, with their success at Fortnite, could have taken that money, could have really funneled the money into making an amazing competitor to Steam. And there's even a possibility here that somebody like Apple or Amazon.com could buy the Epic Game Store and funnel a bunch of money into it, although I imagine Amazon wouldn't actually put any money into it. Or even the likes of YouTube Gaming or Twitch could have their own gaming store and be actual competitors to Steam. But that's not what Epic has done. They've made a bare bones storefront that panders to only the most butthurt of publishers and developers who don't want their games to be allowed to be reviewed or have any kind of feedback, and don't want to, that they want to demand people consume their product without any consumer criticism or feedback at all. And I guess I'll leave it at that since we're trying to make a shorter sale. Let's see. Steam has launched a autumn sale, Black Friday sale. This isn't right. This is an extremely old Video Games Chronicle article. They linked to the wrong link apparently. There's like no update here at all, so that they linked to the total wrong thing. We are in the middle of the spring sale and it does not have this art. This is some autumn sale from potentially years ago. Let's see, if Cyberpunk 2077 was half off, that might have been a year ago. It might have been 2 years ago. Just complete mislink by Video Games Chronicle. It's funny that we're not getting press releases for these announcements around Lollipop Chainsaw, and Gamatsu is just retweeting but yeah, this guy who made Lollipop Chainsaw did put out another update that in the remaster of Lollipop Chainsaw, players can choose from either Yoko Hikasa-san, or the san is not part of her name, san is just an honorific, or Iri Kitamura in the Japanese languages. So they've added a new Japanese voice actor to play the role of Juliet. And he says she is also someone we all know and love, so she might be a fairly famous seiyuu. This is an interesting black and white image that they've accompanied with that. I imagine in the remake, in the English version, you're going to get one voice actor that was the original voice actor in English, and that will be that. Now, this is concerning and makes me think that I should probably buy the Ninja Turtles Cowabunga collection on Steam during this sale. Because Ninja Turtles Cowabunga collection is getting delisted, but only in Japan at the moment. Now, I imagine having a collection of multiple games was a nightmare to negotiate in general, and particularly in Japan with their tighter copyright laws. But I also imagine that there may just be a lack of interest in maintaining this product. We see Pretz on the chat saying, oh, it's the news portion, too bad. Yeah, I didn't do much Yu-Gi-Oh! Today. I'm on a tight time limit today. But we will be doing a little bit of news, and then we'll be showing off what I am thinking I'm going to buy for the spring sale. And then we'll be back to the headline news at the end. Undoubtedly, I am probably curating an audience of dissatisfied customers on my streams, in that I'm doing Yu-Gi-Oh! At all. I really should just make this stream exclusively a news stream and set expectations way better. So, yeah. This is one that passed me by, I guess, because this isn't even on my wish list, when pretty obviously it should be. You do get some weird situation here where these kinds of games, if I am going to buy them, I'm probably just going to do a spotlight on them, and I'm probably going to just like say, alright, here's a bunch of old games probably being run on emulators, and none of them are really that easy to play with that you'd actually want to play through all of them. I think it is the other Ninja Turtles game that I would be more interested in, not the Cowabunga collection, but the newer Ninja Turtles. But taking notice, this is a Konami published game, and I definitely do suspect that we will see this collection be delisted eventually everywhere. So if you want to own these old games, even though it probably would do better to actually run these on separate, more up-to-date emulators and just have the ROMs too. But if you want to own the games on Steam to feel justified to go download the ROMs, I'd say do that quickly. This is the original NES Ninja Turtles. Notice how all the Ninja Turtles have the same red bandana in this, because the Ninja Turtles comic was, I believe, black and white originally for the first few issues. And so it wasn't until later that they started to have different colors. And being a comic, it still would be fairly limited in how many colors you would want to actually put in a print. And each one of these images feel like they are separate box art or concept arts for different generations of Ninja Turtle games. Some of these obviously are also black and white Game Boy games. And yeah, you try and play an old Game Boy game, it's either going to be incredibly difficult or it's going to be incredibly short. Very possibly both. Yeah. But yeah, the delisting of games seems like it's something that we're going to start to talk more about and see more happenings of that. Although I would say in the past, delistings of games have been happening, people have just not been paying enough attention to it. Discord is going to allow devs to make in-app games and server-free apps, which Discord is constantly trying to expand itself to be something other than just a forum/chat thing. And Discord is in this weird position where it is a centralized social media site of sorts that can't really compete with something like Facebook or Twitter, and also didn't jump on the bandwagon of being decentralized and federated like something like Blue Sky or Mastodon, which I would argue puts Discord in this weird mushy middle for the service it offers. Discord makes a lot of sense for individuals and private entities. It doesn't make a lot of sense for businesses or people who want to be more public. It never feels like that people are welcome to join a Discord and then find other Discords through some suggested page and just follow 20 Discords that would all be in one centralized unified feed. I think that's probably a big part of the problem with Discord, is there really isn't, as far as I understand it, a unified feed. I really don't understand Discord much at all. I've used it a couple times. I've made my own Discord, which is pointless because nobody's following it. But yeah, I really haven't put a lot of energy into learning it. Multiverses, we know, is coming back, and as part of them coming back, they are doing Multiverses Happy Meals in the United States. We saw that there were going to be Multiverses Happy Meals in like Germany. Apparently there's some kind of Multiverses card game too, so they are trying to bring back attention to a game that has been pulled once and see if they can get people hyped about it. Take a second bite at the apple, basically, as far as launch attention. I've mentioned it before, but I've been watching Cracking the Cryptic's YouTube channel, and in the past couple of days I've actually been trying to do more Sudokus. while on my phone, that the same ones that Cracking the Cryptic are doing, and that is wasting time, certainly. But one thing occurred to me, and I can't prove it, but there's actually a lot of opportunity on a YouTube channel like Cracking the Cryptics when they're solving a Sudoku for them to take a second bite at the apple and kind of cheat. They are very much champions at doing Sudoku, so they probably don't need to cheat. So I'm not really throwing any accusations out here, but there is an opportunity where somebody who is worse at solving any kind of puzzle game could cheat using some of the tricks that Cracking the Cryptic could do, in that they have two hosts and there doesn't seem to be any real consistent alternating between the two hosts, which means every time there's a Sudoku puzzle, you could have both of the hosts solve the Sudoku puzzle live to tape, not live on a live stream, or you could even have a Patreon only live stream for both people solving the puzzles in parallel, and then you could publish on the public video that would be recorded the person who actually solved the puzzle, and that would double your odds of always getting it right instead of somebody making a mistake. Furthermore, if you are just recording live to tape, you can inherently cheat by solving the puzzle a second time and pretending like it's the first time you solved it, or having the solution in front of you because somebody else has already solved it, or having somebody whisper into your headphones, which the people in Cracking the Cryptic are noticeably wearing headphones. Everybody that streams usually does wear headphones. It wouldn't be hard to have a Skype open, have somebody watching your screen and whispering in hints here and there, and all you would have to do is be a decent actor to not awkwardly pause as somebody is talking to you. It wouldn't be hard to even overlay the screen so that somebody is solving a puzzle on one computer and you can see the solve happen at the same time. So yeah, and that's probably not just puzzle solving. There probably is a lot of ways that you could cheat, and this is the kind of quote-unquote cheating that has been happening in broadcast TV for the longest time. People whispering, producers whispering hints or reminding people of what to say, either through teleprompters or through earpieces. You see it much more naturally when you see sports commentators, where you have 2 or 3 people actually on microphones talking and commenting the games, but you can also easily have a whole team of people pulling up stats on a sports game like football and handing notes or typing notes on a screen to the sports commentators as far as pulling up their stats or when special information you might want to mention about that player. Which I guess that is just a very long-winded way of saying more people make things easier, and there are a lot of creative, ingenious ways to make something look like it's being done by one person when you can have a whole team behind you. So I guess my advice for today is, if you want to be successful in anything, have a good team behind you. Have more people helping you. Even if you're going to make it look like it's just you doing everything, you can outpace your competition by having more assistants. Certainly, if you can afford them. Moving on back to news, GameDeveloper.com says that Baldur's Gate 3, Elden Ring lead Steam Deck's most played games, which that's another shocking thing about the Steam Deck. I'm sure it's shocking to Valve in particular. They made the Steam Deck, the first one, thinking that it was going to be experimented as a competitor to the Switch, and that people would be playing like 2D simplistic games, older games, and the audience clearly has stated that they want the starting at $500 OLED version of the Steam Deck, which I've heard nothing but praise about how much better the OLED version is. It really does seem like it is worth the extra $150 difference, which is crazy because personally I would say, nah, the LCD is probably fine. A QLED screen might do well if they could make screens in that size and at a decent resolution, because then a QLED screen might be almost as good as an OLED at significant savings in the price. But yeah, at the current moment, everybody wants the OLED version, and the majority of people are playing almost brand new games and AAA games. They're really demanding. And if anything, this highlights how people don't care that much about graphics as far as higher resolutions. Nobody's really clamoring for 2K or 4K resolutions. Nobody's clamoring, and nobody ever clamors for really better audio. Nobody's complaining about the Steam Deck controller layout, which I find that's surprising. Then you'd think there would be more pushback on that. Let's see. Moving on. Video Games Chronicle says the Saber COO has confirmed development status of 3 games after Embracer sales raises doubts. Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2, John Carpenter's Toxic Commando, and Jurassic Park Survival are all still in the works. It's going to be the first John Carpenter based game in a very long time. There was some more evident news I heard about this sale in particular, from where Saber bought itself out, or a parent company or a sister company to Saber bought Saber from Embracer. They also seem to buy about 6 other companies at the same time and several games. So it's a more complicated deal than just they bought their own freedom. If anything, it seems like there's a real shift in who's going to be in charge. But it also feels just a little bit fishy to me in that you have THQ failed, and then all of the games start going to Nordic Games, and eventually Nordic Games changes their name to THQ Nordic, and eventually they make a parent company called Embracer. Now Embracer is failing, and now game companies are being shifted over to another company. At a certain level, I guess that's just business if business is being done poorly, but it does also just feel like there might just be a lot of angel investors getting screwed each time here, and that they're convincing shareholders to buy shares in companies that they are running into the ground, whether intentionally or not. And I would like to throw out my own theory that perhaps when a game company goes out of business or fails, and perhaps there should just not be options to sell off a company and have the intellectual property transfer when a company sells. Maybe intellectual property should stay with either the moral rights of the original creators, the actual human beings that made those games, or it should just go into the public domain exclusively. If we punish companies more from doing these kinds of corporate shenanigans of selling one company to another company to another company, and force companies to focus more on actually making products, because inherently this is a failure in capitalism. You have to say Embracer is a failure in capitalism, as far as gamers are concerned and the consumer is concerned, because Nordic Games that turned into THQ, that made a parent company called Embracer, they bought all of these companies and failed to release more than 3 or 4 games in that time. And of the 3 or 4 games they released, I'm not sure any of them were particularly great. At least 2 of them were SpongeBob remakes that were already good games and just remastered, not remakes. And that's just not enough output for the billions of dollars that Embracer was moving around. And so if there were more punishments or more restrictions to make companies focus on actually releasing a product and selling the product to consumers, instead of doing accounting financial shifting around and selling companies left and right, that probably would help the consumer more. But today, again, I said wanted to be a short stream, so I'm not going to get into a big rant. Speaking of failures in capitalism, GameDeveloper.com says EA has axed the Apex Legends developers as part of a $125 million restructuring effort. I think Apex Legends is still pretty popular, so one would assume that it's probably not going to get a lot of support and updates, or the same kind of support and updates, now that they're getting rid of the developers. Video Games Chronicles says a former Pokemon lawyer says that fundraising and press coverage lead to fan projects take down. The worst thing on earth is when your fan project gets press. And yeah, almost certainly that is the case. That seems like that is always the case. That being said, the suggestion here is basically that if you're going to make a Pokemon fan project, you probably should do it on the dark web, or deep web, and always have anonymous names and never keep any real names or anything like that, so the lawyers can't find you, even though the lawyers are probably looking for you. And also, you can't get any funding for your project, so your project is inherently going to suck, unless it just has a massive amount of fandom all willing to work for free forever. The better argument against that thought would almost certainly be just make something like Palworld. Just make a parody. Come out in press, come out proudly parodying Pokemon with your own Pokemon characters, and just don't make it a fan project in any way. And I think that is probably what Palworld has proven more than anything, is that you should just make a parody RPG game with creatures if you want to make a fan project instead of focusing on Pokemon. And inherently, a fan project around Pokemon is a muddled thought anyways, because is it going to be about Ash Ketchum, or is it going to be about the new characters? Is it going to be Gen 1 Pokemon, or Gen 2 Pokemon, or the latest gen of Pokemon? There's a wide amount of Pokemon fans, but each have their own little special likes and dislikes, I imagine. Here's GameDeveloper.com. Embracer Group divests Core Saber Interactive assets in a deal worth $247 million, which is funny because we've seen the deal previously was labeled as $500 million. The deal includes 38 ongoing developmental projects in studios such as 3D Realms, Slipgate, and New World Interactive. Yeah, it's funny. It seems like maybe the numbers got confused in my mind, because Embracer purchased Saber for $525 million and now is selling it for $247 million, so they've lost half of their value investment there. All Saber branded studios and other studios such as Madhead Games, Digic, Fractured Byte, Nimble Giant, and Sandbox Strategies. Beacon also. There's also implications around 4A Games and the Pinball FX maker Zen Studios, which Zen Studios with their Pinball FX3 has been doing pretty poorly too, so I could be happy to see some changes there. But yeah, this is a fairly long article going over all the details, and it does seem like it was a much more complicated trade or sale, compared to what the headlines were suggesting originally, or what the rumors were suggesting originally. Epic Games Store, we talked about that earlier, has revealed its next free titles and launched a spring sale. Call of the Wild, The Angler, and Adam Eve are going to replace the current freebies Deus Ex Mankind Divided in the Bridge, which, yeah. Adam Eve is a visual novel advertisement for an Amazon Prime TV series, whereas Call of the Wild, The Angler is a fishing game, very different from like Deus Ex Mankind Divided, which was a AAA game. Here's Adam Eve. Invincible is the name of the Amazon Prime series. I forgot it for a second there. Here we've seen some actual numbers. Players apparently spent $950 million on Epic Games Store last year, including $310 million on third-party PC games. And then the Epic Games Store gave away 86 free titles in 2023, down from 99 in 2022. These games had a combined worth of $2,055, and users claim nearly 586 million free titles downloaded down from 700 million in 2022. So yeah, it doesn't seem like the Epic Games Store is doing particularly well. It's crazy that this game is for sale at all anywhere. It really should be free as just a simple visual novel cross promotion. And it is also, I guess, somewhat crazy that it is on the Epic Games Store and the Steam Store instead of being given away via Amazon Prime's own app store on mobile phones, Android phones, or through the Twitch Prime free gaming function. I'm hearing more about this game, Sea of Stars, and it does seem like it's gaining in popularity here. Sea of Stars reaches 5 million players. I will leave it at that from GameDeveloper.com. I'm gonna obviously need to do more research there. Tekken 8 players have found a glitch that lets them cheat to have massive costumes. So this is like a giant pink hat, and by glitching it so the hat is way bigger, it hides the hit boxes and the hurt boxes of the player, and so they can just totally beat the other player, because the other player can't even see where the person is. All they could do is flail about blindly. So with this glitch, those people using the glitch are going to be banned according to the producer. But this is definitely not the kind of news you want to have around your fighting game, and not the kind of news we hear very often around the fighting game. We already talked about how the Disney Dreamlight Valley studio Gameloft is making a Dungeons and Dragons game. Alright. Oh yeah, this doesn't have anything to do with streaming, but I was experimenting on getting my security cameras to get what is an RSTP? No, it's an RTSP. Real-time streaming protocol, I imagine is what that stands for. Link. You can get that to play in OBS. So in theory, I can have my security cameras in both they have a preview mode and a record mode. The preview mode is a smaller amount of bitrate. I could have my security cameras streaming if you wanted to. I don't know. I imagine if you were going to just have like a porn house where there's multiple rooms and they're all cycling and streaming, or if you were going to stream to like a private stream so that you could watch over a house when you're away on vacation, that might make some sense there. I thought during the pandemic in particular, it would have been a great idea to take that same concept to a higher level and have high schools and colleges have security cameras that are still acting as security cameras but are also acting as camcorders, so that the teachers can still be in their classrooms presenting lessons even if the students are watching via a stream. Unfortunately, during the pandemic, I saw the vast majority of schools and teachers didn't want to bother to really try and learn any kind of technology or do anything amazing, and they just wanted to fail and struggle at it, and that's exactly what they did. And they just failed an entire generation by being too lazy or too stupid to learn a new technology. In my case, if I was going to really use it, though, and this has nothing to do with video games, I probably would just have it on my preview screen. In OBS, you have a studio mode where you can have the current program that is what is being shown right now, and then you can have a preview. In my case, I have a timer screen I've made on my preview, and I never actually switch. You're supposed to switch from preview to program a lot in between each transition, but I never actually do that. So I could add to the timer screen just in the background my security cameras. There is, unfortunately, though, questions certainly around that, as far as, are you just wasting bandwidth that could be used during a live stream, and choking my network completely, because it very possibly would choke my network, particularly since I could have an infinite number of cameras. With one security camera system, I could have 16 cameras going, so 16 different streams in parallel if I really felt the need to do that. I probably wouldn't. For the most part, just a front door camera would be more than enough just to see if somebody's going to interrupt me or knock on the door. Yeah, maybe a front hallway and a front door camera, 2 streams. So that's something I figured out how to do. I was struggling with it quite a bit because I spelled the URL, which is different based on what device you're using. It was supposed to be a capital C, a lowercase h, and then the number. So channel 1, channel 2, channel 3. I had a capital C and a capital H and a 1, and so it wasn't working. So yeah, buggy. And with the newest versions of OBS, you need to use a VLC video LAN client source, where this instructions here says you should use a this instructions from 2021 says you should use media sources, and I couldn't get it to work there. So this information is old, which also highlights that not too many people have actually bothered to experiment in that way. Yeah. It is kind of funny that the best use of the idea certainly would be to have like an OnlyFans house where it is just cameras in every room from multiple angles, and you can just switch between them, or you can stream all of them at the same time. And weirdly, I think people would probably pay for that, as a certain audience would, to just watch people all the time, 24/7 surveillance, voyeurism, fetish type things. You'll be surprised how many people have succeeded by accidentally streaming themselves, quote unquote, accidentally streaming themselves just sleeping. Libretto has the Vercon 32 emulator ported to Libretto, so emulators still are happening, just not particularly the Nintendo ones. And then they had a planned server maintenance, and so they took it down and brought it back up, which isn't really news. Let's see, what else did we have here? We need to hurry. Video Games Chronicles. Ninja Theory has confirmed Senua Saga's Hellblade 2 will include a photo mode and shared mode. That's not what I was clicking on. What was I clicking on? Well, we're going to talk about the spring sale in a second here. Pocket Pair apparently is in discussions to bring Palworld to new platforms and said it would be open to considering partnership or acquisition offers. That probably would be the best thing for Palworld, considering the history of Pocket Pair games is to just leave them in early access forever. People are really hating the Star Wars Battlefront Classic Collection in that, in particular, they only spun up 64-player max servers to support the online play when there's thousands upon thousands of people trying to play. So yeah, they really just shoveled it out there without supporting it at all. I'm trying to see if there's anything else here worth mentioning. Sonic and Angry Birds crossover event has started, taking place over 5 mobile games for the next few weeks. Next week. I have no idea what I clicked on. I probably didn't intentionally click on anything. Sony is also reportedly set to discount the PS5 Slim across Europe again this month. Yeah, I don't think any of these older articles are things that I really want to bother to try and talk about, so we'll move on. Yeah, and I said earlier I wasn't going to highlight games that are being listed, game jobs, so I'm not going to talk about this. Ziv Davis, IGN, is looking for a guides editor and trending editor, which is kind of surprising. Ziv Davis is even looking for a human instead of just AI replacements. Now, I've kind of sworn off talking about cosplay because YouTube doesn't want me highlighting the lewd cosplay that is the vast, a significant portion, I won't say the vast majority, but I do want to point out something here, that when we look at the color palette that's being used in the Amazon Fallout trailers, it is all very brown and dirty and dusty, which is in line with Fallout. But I do want to point out here's an example of what it could have been, that they could have flashbacks where it is much more bright and colorful in the colors and the appearance, or at least in the vaults it could have been much more bright and colorful in the events. In the vaults is what I'm trying to say there. And yeah, that could contrast certainly from present day and outside the vaults more, and just add some needed color in the costuming. There's also not very detailed in a lot of outfits. Here's another cosplay that is still fairly brown and dark, but feels way more detailed than what I've seen as far as the outfits in the Fallout trailers. I also want to say, with Akira Toriyama, the maker of Dragon Ball, passing away, there was definitely some uniqueness there in that a lot of the cosplayers, even the lewd cosplayers, were bringing out old cosplays of them dressed up as Dragon Ball characters in a weird kind of tribute to him. It seems fairly inappropriate. I mean, I know that's what the cosplayers do, is they cosplay, but maybe they should have taken a moment for silence. I also suspect that we will see probably some kind of sale around Steam at some point around Dragon Ball specifically, so now might be a pretty bad time to buy Dragon Ball games, but it probably is still fine. Video Games Chronicle says US game spending could be down 10% this year. This is from a market research firm, Circana. Which, yeah. I also want to say I saw a new YouTuber who went to the Video Game Museum in Frisco, Texas, and he showed a lot more footage than what I think the Video Game Museum has ever shown themselves as far as what their museum looks like. They have a lot more display stands and things that I would have just thought they wouldn't have. They do a pretty poor job on their own website of just showing off footage of what they have. And I guess maybe that is because they think that would prevent people from coming, but I don't think that's really going to stop anybody from coming to a video game museum. I still heavily question if a lot of the video game museum, the National Video Game Museum in Frisco, Texas, isn't still very much a hands-on kids museum / arcade. There's no telling if they have any backroom collection at all, or how much of a backroom collection they have. And there's certainly just an infinite amount of displays and things you could collect, much of which are going to be in fairly rough condition if you can get them at all, the older they get. Now, as far as sales being down, yeah, I can believe that sales can be down for anything. I think we are just moving into people being broke more and more, and with people being broke more and more, we would very much see less and less purchasing of things. I saw an article about how people aren't buying fabric softener as much as they used to, which I'm not sure people need fabric softener as much as they used to. The fabrics themselves are pretty soft these days. OBS released version 30.1. This has a rewritten image slideshow source, game capture, audio capture on Windows, HDR for HVAC over RTMP for YouTube. So I'm probably going to want to buy either a 5 or 6 series video card, and at that point I probably am going to try and upgrade the technology, not anytime soon, 2, 3, 5 years from now. But at that point I probably will try to upgrade, but without monitors that support HDR, it's going to be just a major overhaul to have high dynamic range footage being captured to stream over a new protocol. And yeah, it will probably be very slow adoption to the point where people on cell phones and their own computers can watch high dynamic range footage. But particularly for video games, I think HDR will be beneficial once it just becomes very standardized. Pipewire video capture device sources, GPU rescaling for outputs, AV1 support for WIP, which I don't know what WIP stands for, and more. So it's big updates, certainly, when you have a major change, but version 0.1 also indicates that it probably was something that needed to be updated from a version 0.0. The thing about open broadcast software in particular, though, is that you really want something amazing, and to have something amazing added to it, it means you probably have to be a little bit creative as far as what you're going to do, because they're going to make generic updates, and it's going to be up to you to figure out how to use the generic updates to do something that is unique to you and you alone, so it becomes your advantage and your proprietary concept, versus something being open source that everybody will do and it'll just be the gimmick. For instance, if they added a feature that would make thumbnails for you and add like red circles or arrows in the thumbnails, which for a long time there were very helpful and successful on YouTube, well, then everybody would just do that, even without the red circles. If OBS made a thumbnail creation tool for you, everybody would use it, and then all the thumbnails would look about the same. Although, if they make thumbnails for me that are even slightly better than what YouTube automatically makes for me, that would probably be great. And I certainly have thought about ways to make my own thumbnails. And I could do it, but it never really felt like it would come out particularly artistic. Of course, I haven't thought about it since AI became viable, so maybe I could make AI generated thumbnails now for every game I'm covering. That is something to think about, at least, but almost certainly that's a backburnered project. To wait till AI is way better and less questionable about its copyright status. And then, let's see, what was this other one? The International Game Developer Association is going to GDC 2024, and they're having a neurodivergent in games networking. I don't personally. I was going to go on a rant here, but I'm trying to save some time, so I'm not going to go on too much of a rant. But I don't personally like the all-encompassing phrase neurodivergent. It is probably the right phrase to use, but it has become too wide of a scale where anybody who has ADD or claims they have ADD or dyslexia, and certainly in the past there have been a lot of people that have just claimed to have dyslexia without ever actually being diagnosed with dyslexia, or as an excuse. They're just looking to be a victim of something, looking to find an excuse for things. But yeah, anybody who has even the slightest neurodivergency, like ADD or dyslexia or just a slow reader, can be on one end of that scale. And then on the other end of the scale, it's somebody who is potentially drooling and can't wipe their mouth, can't care for themselves, can't wipe their own butt when they're going to the bathroom, can't dress themselves, can't clothe themselves. Like it's just way too wide of a spectrum. And when you have and I'm going to try to avoid to use the R word here, but when you have a drooling, incapable of caring for themselves type person, they really shouldn't be involved in any work, even if they do want to work. There's a certain level, in my opinion, of people, if you're just incapable of actually providing to society, and society is instead just bending over backwards to let you pretend like you're contributing to society by giving you a job that you really can't do, that's a problem too. And yeah, even closer to the more capable people on the spectrum, these people just lack social skills very often, and just should just be on disability. Society should just take care of those people instead of trying to integrate them into a system that they're just not really compatible with. And I feel like even the actually capable neurodivergent people don't really want to work with other neurodivergent people, like, either, because everybody has their own quirks, and so two neurodivergent people who are capable of working in a game company probably don't want to interact with each other, and non-neurodivergent people are not really happy working with neurodivergent people because that makes it more difficult to communicate and accomplish things. If it wasn't neurodivergence, if it was, say, blindness, it would be fairly ridiculous to push an idea or narrative for a blind person to be a 3D modeler in game development. The only real difference there is that neurodivergence often is being defined as somebody who lacks the mental capability to communicate well or interact socially well with people, or think in a similar way that the gamers who buy the games actually would want the creators to think, in the sense that if everybody expects that when you see a weapon you're supposed to go and pick it up, and then a neurodivergent person programs it for the weapon to disappear when you go to pick it up, well, that might be interesting every now and then. If that is the way it always happens over 100 different encounters, that's just not thinking the way a player would think, and not satisfying what a player expects. Yeah, and I imagine, certainly, if you got a picture, just from the looks of it, you could stereotype that the vast majority of people that will actually make it to GDC 2024 and be in this group and self-identify as neurodivergent, it is going to just be a lot of SJWs who want to be classified as neurodivergent, and very few people who would actually pass a like DSM-5, the Diagnostics and Statistics Manual version 5, that is used in at least the United States to diagnose certain categories. Although I'm not sure DSM actually covers mental categories. As another problem, at least in the United States, is that there sometimes feels like there's some inconsistency on what who and how people are diagnosed mentally. And in the United States too, they don't really want to deal with too many people who have mental problems, so they are reluctant to diagnose people, and even if people are diagnosed, they're reluctant to actually help people. The Steam Deck refurbished listings, I've been trying to follow these for a while now. I just don't think that refurbished units are ever going to be listed again, unless they do something weird with the summer sale and release OLEDs that are refurbished, which would be an intriguing twist, certainly. But yeah. So, let's talk about the spring sale, which I confused for the summer sale. You have an anime cat girl with a Valve logo here, and an anime cat with a hat as a delivery girl. She's going through her phone, I guess, trying to get the GPS to the next location. Now, what's weird here is I've never really seen anybody have like a phone holder on their leg and a leg strap. I've only seen that in porn of hentai, where you would have a controller for a sex toy strapped to your leg. She also has a backpack, so the leg phone holder, or the leg holder here, seems weird. Maybe it's getting a little too anime. And then the rest of it is just falling leaves, and you have a Steam logo in here. But when you can't click on this in any way, unless there's some kind of secret click, nor are they giving away points or trading cards in the spring sale, so it is really not much of a sale, and probably a skippable sale. The summer sale and the Black Friday equivalent sale, fall sale, are the big sales, certainly, to look out for twice a year. Unfortunately, those are also sales that seem to line up particularly with everything else being on sale, whereas I can see video game sales being more generous and having things be put on a sale a month before or after, instead of just trying to squeeze everything into what happened there. Well, I tried to open this Who Wants to Be a Millionaire to see if it was something to pay attention to, but that jumped the front page, it looks like, and now the front page is struggling. It jumped to front page very low down, which I was scrolling very low down here just to see what they were suggesting, but it is very much just a Steam front page, infinite scroll of games being suggested once you get past a certain level, and they're good suggestions for me, but nothing particularly amazing. I continue to suspect with every cell that they are slowly changing the pixel value from the deep valve blue to a lighter blue to the point where it eventually will just become either white or black. So the bright blue is going to darker blues the other way. I said that backwards. And then I think it is going to just be a full black page, which black page websites for gaming make a lot of sense to me, whereas white pages feel like more serious news type websites, inherently a dark and light theme. I think definitely they're slowly trying to boil the frog, and eventually Valve Steam will look like this. It will just be black and white text on black. Of course, somebody could be sampling the colors and testing that theory out, and if that really was happening, somebody would have probably made that claim already. It may very well be just a case that they are experimenting with colors with each sale to make it look a little bit different, and then one day they may just make a full-on black store refresh. Changing the color theme to a light and dark mode isn't really the big update that you would want, though, if you're going to relaunch your website. There's, I think, still a lot of room for improvement, but yeah, there's no real event here, just sales. So my tendency here is what I would like to buy is a Steam Deck OLED. Problem with that is you either buy a $400 LCD version, which everybody was happy enough with, but nowhere as happy as the $550 OLED version, or pay another $100 for another 512 gigabytes, which is not necessary. Honestly, if I could get the OLED version, which is 256 gigabytes of space, I would be happy with that. I do, I guess, have Wi-Fi 6E, I think. The battery life is the big update with OLED more than even the high dynamic range. The screens are exactly the same. The only thing different between these two versions are the amount of SSD, which I could upgrade that myself. You get a longer cable also with this version, and this is at the 6 nanometer process, but this is at a 7 nanometer, which roughly that means that it might have better battery life because of that. And then this goes up to 90 hertz, where this is up to 60 hertz. The resolutions are the same, but the size of the screen is also bigger. Now, part of my challenge, if I do buy a Steam Deck, is going to try and turn it into something that can also act as a tablet for me. You could also buy one of these models, although I don't know why you would want to buy the even lesser models or the middle model here. I guess they're selling you the middle tier of the LCDs for $400. This is the low tier of the LCDs for $350, and this is the high tier of the LCDs. Which, yeah, if the low tier could get down by another $100, there is an argument to buy these instead. Yeah, until you have the Steam Deck for a while, I don't think you should probably buy the docking station, and even at $80, you're really not getting any savings there. And then they're advertising up to 20% off of certified refurbished, but honestly, if you want a refurbished Steam Deck, you probably are going to have to get it through GameStop. And they just are continuing to promote things. I would also argue that they probably should make a Steam Deck Lite that is just a screen and doesn't have all the controllers. Maybe just has touchpads on it and loses the buttons, and then you could save some money there. But if you could just also make a Steam Deck that had grips but no controllers, then you could hold it and watch Netflix on it, and then you would dock it to play with a controller. Put a kickstand on it, put it on the table, and then play with a controller. You could also have much bigger speakers if you just have all that empty space on the side. So I do think there is probably room if they were going to make a new Steam Deck. The Steam Deck is now on SteamOS 3, which is an Arc-based system. They also, when I was shopping, and I ran into this, and I'm not sure this has anything to do with the sale, but I did see this, in that they had a year in review for 2023. I feel like we may have covered this, but give some interesting insights into what 2023 was for me. I played 32 games, 27 were new games that I hadn't played before. I was one shy of 500 achievements. That's gonna drive me crazy. Kind of shocking, I played 54% of games with keyboard and mouse, where 46% were with controllers. I would have thought it would have been more controller based. I played 20 games that got achievements. Of 32 games, 129 were considered rare achievements, which I don't know what percentage has to be considered a rare achievement. Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel 48% of the time, Prey 8% of the time, Lego DC Supervillains 7% of the time. Let's see. The average median middle of players was 16 achievements, so I am way higher than that. The average game a gamer plays is 4, so I'm way higher than that, but not as high. And the longest streak was 20 days without skipping a day and not playing anything on Steam. Which honestly, that streak probably should have been higher, but the medium here is 5. 9% of my time were playing games that were released in 2023, and I wonder if that isn't Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel exclusively. And then this is the exact same information being repeated. I only earned 2 badges of many things that could have been done, although most of these things are probably wastes of time. And then apparently I was playing Yu-Gi-Oh! So a lot of roguelike deck builders and card battlers and roguelike games. Played some walking simulators, at least one. Puzzle platformer, psychedelic. Yeah. So this really highlights how much time I spent last year just playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And it definitely highlights also just my rather lack of interest in playing Yu-Gi-Oh! When you see how much time I spend on it. Where when I'm playing a specific game like Prey, it's going to only be for a month or 2, and then I'll move on to the next pre-recorded footage. And almost certainly I'll only play one game at a time, so it's pretty easy to tell which games I was focusing on. This is a great example of how boring achievements can really be when you see them all out by themselves. With the exception of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, I really should only have been playing one game at a time. from January 22nd to February 11th was my longest streak. I'm not taking a day off. But increasingly I need to take a day off. And here's just going to show every single game I covered in 2023 or I recorded in 2023. Some of these haven't aired yet. But yeah, with YouTube Shorts and other elements, having longer streaks are less likely to happen. So I noticed that. Now, here's what let's just refresh this now that we have the unified shopping cart working. That is a new feature. Also, private games are features, so when you want to add something to your account, you now can go for my account, private, or this is a gift. Some games can't be labeled as a gift. So if I was not to buy the Steam Deck, I have a cart here for like $276 worth of games, which is still a lot for games. And so generally I'd say maybe get the Cowabunga collection if you care about Ninja Turtle old games. Personally, 66% off of Stasis, so I can continue covering that series. Makes sense. Resident Evil 7 Biohazard Gold Edition for $15.86 is a pretty decent deal, and it lets me continue. Now, there's a decent argument to remove Dragon Ball FighterZ Fighter Pass 2, considering how I haven't even played Dragon Ball FighterZ at all to show off, and I already own Fighter Pass Season 1, so we can remove that. I want to get Inscription. A lot of these discounts are not great, though. I want to get Inscription to compare it to Hand of Fate 2, and so 60% off to get that to be a $10 game. I'd like to play Islands of Insight, but at 50% off, that is not really realistic either. I'd like to get Nier Automata Game of Yorha Edition. I probably should get the DLC around that too, and so that makes that price a little high. There's less of a sale for Dead Cells, but there's an argument to buying Dead Cells in that they've abandoned, they've done all the support they're going to do. I wouldn't say they really abandoned it, but yeah, it would make sense maybe now that the game is quote-unquote complete to cover it, but that is a high price at $23.55. Grabbing the Halo Master Chief at 75% off for $10 is probably the best you're going to get until it becomes an incredibly old game like Bejeweled or Zuma's Revenge, which are 99 cents off, and I have no real interest in covering those games. Same is kind of true with the Apogee Throwback Pack. These are all games that are just the 99-cent type games that I would use as stocking stuffers. I should get Rethink It Evolved at 99 cents to see how different that is from Rethink. The old Alone in the Dark original games are 90% off at $1.49. Much better discounts now. You can get Metro Last Light Redux for $1.99. I think that's a decently reviewed game. And then there's definitely some arguments against some of these games. Like, I'm not really going to cover SimCity 3000 Unlimited, so just remove that. I do want Dungeon Keeper 1 and 2. I would like to cover the Talos Principle, which makes an argument to not have 2 puzzle games. This is a bundle that, since I already own the first Talos Principle, that gives me a slightly better discount at $16.90. I would like to play the Monkey Island, the newest Monkey Island game, for $13-14.49. That's maybe a little too expensive, particularly when you compare it to like getting Doom Eternal, which is a lot of these are bundles that are completing for games I already own, and that's really the way to do it. I'd like to get Bloodstained and Bloodstained Ritual Knight Iga's backpack, but that's $5 of DLC. And then you get Bloodstained Ritual of the Night by buying this bundle, which includes Child of Light, which I already own, for $7.99. So together you're getting at a $12 there. Slay the Spire is 66% off for $8.49. I think I can make an argument to play Inscription and then something else and leave that off. And so then we have the rest of these, which I'll just scroll through here because I have run out of time. There's definitely some crazier ones, but yeah, that's gonna be it for this stream. As always, thanks for watching.